What is the grossest act of revenge you've ever played a part in? Covered an entire floor in shaving cream, except for a series of carefully placed stepping stones that we covered in KY, then waited in the apartment below. It worked perfectly. Victim jumped to the first KY patch, fell over and slid through the shaving cream. Had a huge disagreement with my bank a few years ago. They were totally wrong. Refused to admit it or refund the costs that I incurred. So I went to the grocery store and bought a huge piece of fish. Then went to said bank and put the fish into my safety deposit box. Went into the bank a couple of times in the next week or two. You could smell something fishy, but it was not overpowering. However, about a week later I got a phone call from the bank asking me to come in. When I entered the bank it stunk to high heavens, and there, the manager, who had goofed me during the prior disagreement, was there having a few other people open their safety deposit boxes. My turn to open mine. The stench was awful. I open it up and sure enough there is a piece rotted fish in it. The manager screamed at me, "You put a piece of fish in your safety deposit box?" I said, "Hey pal, do you know the price of salmon these days?" Told him to get the duck out of my way and walked out. I felt a little bad that I inconvenienced other safety deposit box holders, but it was so worth it. Take that, CIBC. Not my story, but an old maintenance guy from my old apartment complex. He heard that many cars were being broken into and he had just bought a new Jeep. Within a week, the Jeep was broken into. So he replaced his windows, filed a police report and called it good. The next week, however, he walked outside and saw that his windows were broken out again. He got everything repaired and did the same thing with a police report and all. He ended up buying a new radio that probably had the latest and greatest tape player, but he knew that break-ins were still occurring in his neighborhood. This is when he thought to tape razor blades underneath the stereo in the rear so when someone grabbed it, it would slice their fingers. Within a week, he walks outside and realizes his window is broken out again. But he remembered that he taped the razor blades to the stereo. So he walks up to his Jeep and describes it as a crime scene. He said there was blood everywhere along with a blood trail on the sidewalk from the person that broke in. But his stereo was still there. No one ever ducked with his Jeep again. He said he still felt really bad for it, but he got to keep his radio. When I was in first grade I was taking a piss in a urinal at the private, mostly Jewish, school I went to. I was minding my own business when the school bully grabbed me by the shoulder and pushed me into the urinal. In the confusion I ended up turning around with my little member hanging out for the world to see. Being that I am uncircumcised in a mostly Jewish school, the bully and his posse started to point and laugh at my sheathed sword. So I bit the tip of his finger off. I was promptly expelled. I used to be a cocktail waitress, and for some reason guys would automatically think that because I worked at a bar, they could grab pinch fondle me. I reported it a few times, because many would slap pinch so hard there'd be bruises. Nothing changed. I was pretty much told to deal with it. Well, I thought that were bullet, so I sewed tacks into some boy short underwear, pointy side facing out, completely covering my ass. Whenever someone slapped my behind, they got pricked by a ton of little needles. I ended up getting in trouble for it, which I thought was stupid, but I'm pretty sure that it was one of my best ideas to date. TLDR, I made assholes stab themselves. I was a geeky, ostracized kid for most of my childhood, and one guy in particular liked to make my life miserable. During the 3rd grade he would pinch me, throw sand in my eyes, destroy my schoolwork and harass me verbally. I put up with it because I didn't believe in violence, and because showing a reaction would have been admitting defeat. Until one day, at lunch, I heard him bragging to his friends that he'd microwaved a hamster to death, just to hear it scream. He then began laughing hysterically as he described the pitiful sounds it made before it died. My patience with him ended. It was one thing for me to deal with his bullet, but I couldn't stand by while he tortured small animals. So I tapped his shoulder, waited until he turned around, and decked him hard enough to make something crunch in his face. He made a strangled sound and fell backward onto the bench. Instead of fighting back, he blinked and looked utterly baffled by the blood on his hands. I stood over him long enough to make eye contact. Pick on someone your own size, or I will hurt you badly. Then I walked away. I lived in fear of retribution from the teachers for weeks. but he never told on me. I think he must have been embarrassed that a nerdy kid turned his face to meat. From that point on, he stopped harassing me. I don't know if he stopped hurting animals. TLDR, I punched the lights out of a sadistic bully after I overheard him talking about microwaving small animals. There was this scumbag Steve that was friends with my neighbor, who was also a well-off mad at his parents' little thug. Well, this scumbag Steve fellow thought it was funny to throw a basketball at my dad's work van. My dad witnessed this through the window and ran out to check on the damage. The scumbags take off running and my father inspects the dents they left on the back door of his vehicle. He's fuming mad, but the kid's parents are out of town for the weekend. Cut to 10:30 that night, and these punks are wasted. It was just the two of them, drinking the one kid's dad's beer. Scumbag Steve is passed out in the backyard and the neighbor boy asked us to help carry him inside. My little brother and I walk over and drag Steve into their basement and the neighbor goes and passes out, too. That's when my brother devises and coordinates that most deprived human act I've ever witnessed. He eats in a plastic bag and proceeds to unload the contents of said plastic bag into the back of Scumbag Steve's sagging sweatpants. Scumbag Steve never spoke a word about it. He thinks he hit himself to this day. My neighbor is in jail for 6 counts of burglary now. Frozen 6-pound fish inside the door of an asshole's car during a Canadian winter. Results were not realized until spring. Hilarity ensued. Pooped in the tank of an asshole's toilet. Don't know if he ever found it. Liquid ivory dish soap in condoms left in the backseat of an asshole's car. Hilarity ensued. Someone always helped herself to others' beer. Always. Even after being informed multiple times that this behavior was frowned upon. Concocted a revenge beer out of urine, saliva, ashes, and the blood from a package of uncooked steak. Replaced cap. Left in fridge. Hilarity did not ensue. Vomiting however did. Removed marijuana from the bowl of a pipe. Filled bowl with pubic hair concealed by a thin layer of marijuana. Left house party. Packed caviar in her curtain rods and raw shrimp behind her switch plates. She never found them, but accused me of burying a dead animal under her house. He had to sell at a $50,000 loss and move. I can only imagine the stench. This was a former boss who owed me $800 and dared me around for 3 months with excuses. Never leave your house key under the mat, people. It was the beginning of the year, in early primary, elementary, school, and we were making A3 posters that were to decorate the school hall. As one may know, one of the worst crimes in this period of development is the eraser napper. The thief in question had my eraser more than I did. Cunningly I took my eraser and dipped the edge he had been using into some ink. Shortly after, a hand slithered across desk, my newly modified eraser was gone. Just as time wasn't used for permission. Time wasn't used to inspect the tool of destruction. The subsequent screams stalled class. In one act all heads rotated to one spot, to the carnage of my making. Anyway, I'm running out of time here. The day finished in about 2 minutes time and we had to hand in our posters. Till the end of term the result of my actions were plastered on a wall. A smear of black ink over said masterpiece. As a warning to all, never steal my eraser. Yesterday I found a huge centipede climbing my leg as I was drying off from my shower, so I covered that itch in soap. I haven't been messed with by a centipede since then. Had a crazy. We later found out she was a meth head landlord in a college town who rented a house to me and 3 other college guys. Older house. Not in great shape, but we didn't care. She would appear at 5 or 6 in the morning on Sat or Sun, let herself in, and scream at us 4 hungover 19 to 21 years olds for the state of the place. She would shut off the power if the rent was 1 day late, would forget to pay the water bill, which would get shut off about every other month, etc. When we moved out, we made sure that every access panel, switch plate, outlet plate, return air vent, and an attic access had raw chicken and or trout stuffed behind it. We also left open jars of peanut butter in the void beneath several cabinets to ensure a mouse problem. TLDR. Crazy landlord harassed us. Made illegal surprise inspections. We made sure her house ended up smelling like a seafood restaurant dumpster. I downvoted some itch who downvoted me first. My cousin's ex-husband worked at a factory where there was one Asholiosa. His name was Manuel. Asaho was notorious for getting into people's lunches and eating what he wanted out of them. These were big blue collar guys who often brought 2 or 3 sandwiches. So Manuel would eat a sandwich or 2 out of a couple of lunches every day as what he thought was a joke. One of his frequent victims didn't find it so funny. One day, the victim took a couple of slices of bread into the men's room with him and basically took a dump on one. Slapped a piece of lettuce on it, put mustard and mayo on the other, slid the works into a baggie, put it into a brown sack, and stuck it in the fridge in the break room. Of course, Manuel got a hold of it, and while the guys who were in on the prank could barely keep a straight face as they all sat around the lunch table, he whipped out the sandwich and took a big bite. My cousin's ex said he never would have believed that a human being could actually turn the color green, but Manuel did. In fact, they had to call an ambulance and rush him to the hospital, so I guess Manuel got the last laugh, a paid sick week off, unless you take into account his new nickname that stayed with him long after the incident, Manuel It Sandwich. Half of these revenges involve piss or it. What the hell is wrong with you all? In high school I was FWB with a guy and we would have a sex pretty often, always a condom, but one month I was late. Told my best friend. She told her boyfriend. And of course he told my FWB. Silly me thought he was my boyfriend. In hindsight it was just me being used for sex. FWB disappears. Won't take my calls. Nada. I get my period. But say nothing for a month. June rolls around. His birthday is coming up and so is Father's Day. Always a sad time for him since his dad had skipped out on him at an early age. Decide when to strike and how. Bought one of those small plastic containers of chicken livers. Took it home. Chopped some up. Put it in a gallon Ziploc. And poured in some bloody liquid for good measure. Then, I make a card and put a message on it. Put the card in the bottom of a small box and set the bag on top of it. Throw in some blue wrapping tissue and wrap it nicely. Wait for a day when he isn't home. A nice hot day, and leave the gift on the steps in his carport. Wish I could have seen the look on his face with the bloody chunky bag in one hand and in the other hand the card which said Happy Father's Day. Love, your son. No one ducked with me in general. This only led to adding to the degree to which I was not ducked with. It became somewhat of a local urban legend. No internet back then to debunk and mess up my plan. This thread is ducked up. I love it. I sometimes like to put 15% or so of my paycheck into bombs for my government to drop on innocent people. I dipped my nuts in my teacher's water because I thought she was being rich. When I was mad at my wife I would wait until she was asleep, then move close to her and fart on her as loud as I could. I used to work at a restaurant with a guy named Chuck. Chuck was a junkyard dog. He'd eat anything, even food off customers' plates. Anytime the kitchen would make food for the servers, he'd swoop in and eat half of it. I got sick of it, so one night I went into the back, got a lump of lard and rolled it in coconut. Then I stuck a shrimp tail on the end of it. I tossed it in the deep fryer until the coconut toasted. The perfect fake coconut shrimp. I sat it on a plate, told him it was a leftover from a table. He grabbed it and crammed it down his gullet. When he bit down, hot, white fat oozed out of his mouth. He was incredibly wary about eating it off plates from that day on. I am very ashamed of this, but since you asked, as a teenager, we had a neighbor with a vicious dog that had bitten me several times. After the third or fourth time that the animal bit me, I threw a couple poison-laced hot dogs over the fence. The dog died. Like I said, I regret every inch of it, but I can't change what I did. I dipped my brother's toothbrush in the toilet. I'm ashamed. A friend put dog poop under the door handle of a car that blocked his building's entrance. Simple and efficient. I spunked in a girl's shampoo and never told her. I always wondered about the aftermath. A guy I was dating and living with cheated on me with one of my co-workers one night, and I found out from a mutual friend as it was happening. Pretty much got a play-by-play. When he got home I confronted him about it and he hit me several times. I managed to get away and ran to a neighbor's and called the cops. The asshole obviously went to jail for the night, and I packed his it up. While packing his toiletries, I pissed on that motherfucker's toothbrush. He came to get his things the next day and I handed the boxes over. He moved in with a mutual friend and I have it on good word that he used that toothbrush for like 6 months. A friend at school stole my car keys one day and made a copy. For a week or two he would randomly move my car to different parts of the school parking lot. I told him, if you steal my car again, I'm going to it on your truck. That week as I walked out to my car after school, I watched him drive away in it laughing. I then proceeded to it on a newspaper in the bed of his truck and then placed it on the windshield. He did not take my car again. TLDR. Friend took my car so I it on his windshield in the high school parking lot. I was a freshman in college and my roommate was loose. She claimed to be a lesbian and talked it about men all the time, but slept with quite a few men anyways. I didn't judge though. That is until one day we had a get together with friends and discussion got a little TMI. I ended up admitting I was a virgin in the process. Now, my roommate couldn't let this information go. She made fun of my virginity almost daily and kept up comments like you need to get laid like it would solve all my problems about insecurity. Blah blah blah. She tried setting me up with some homophobic douche, oddly enough, but that just didn't fly with me. Then she crossed the line when she put a condom filled with lotion in my bed, and it stuck to my leg, and her friend blew up a fruit flavored lubed condom and hit me in the face with it jokingly, but I was filled with repressed virgin rage. When she was gone for the whole weekend with one of her little duck buddies, I used her toothbrush to clean my computer keys. Very nasty computer keys. I also used it to clean the dusty window and my fish's bowl. I didn't commit a visible noticeable prank because I knew she would get revenge. And this just felt wonderful. TLDR. Slutty pseudo lesbian roommate gives me it for being a virgin. I cleaned the room with her toothbrush. Some girl cheated on me so I jizzed in her face lotion and threw a fake wedding ring into a lake. In college, there was a guy who was the most annoying prick imaginable that lived in the dorms with us. We had words over something. Specifics don't matter. So a friend of mine and I decided one drunken night to show him what we thought of him. For days, we ate asparagus every day in the cafeteria. We pissed into empty milk jugs to save it. Then, while the prick was away, he took a cardboard tube, held it at an angle at the bottom of the door, and poured the piss down the tube. It gained momentum in the tube and rushed under his door, covering his floor in our foul-smelling piss. I moved to a new city. After 2 months in the apartment, some new neighbors moved in upstairs. They were absolute ithead hipsters. They would be loud as hell until 3 to 4 AM every night. I talked to them on several occasions trying to find an amicable solution, but it would just exacerbate their actions. So I tracked down their emails and phone numbers. I went online and signed them up for everything I could find. Then I found a bunch of those free text notification sites. They would always leave their phones on the floors, and when they'd get a call or text you could hear the phone vibrate through the ceiling. Then them come running down the hallway to answer it. When they were up late at night and keeping me awake, through earplugs and a white noise generator, I would go and sign them up for text notification after text notification, listening them run to their phone each time. They actually got quieter and I moved out as fast as I could. Poured a friend's cup of beer out and topped it off with my piss once. Wasn't proud of what I did, but he had it coming. I told him later that night what I did. I learned that night though, that you never piss in a Marine's beer, and then tell them about it. Needless to say he tried choking me, and a knife was almost involved. We're still friends though. I once mailed it to an idiot who had been an arsehole to me. I once had a very sick friend. Let's call him Tony, and another, Ryan. Tony wanted revenge on this Ryan for tricking him with a new cell phone number. This kid had posed as a girl and talked to Tony for months, using googled pictures of some pretty girl, only to call him on Christmas and breaking it to him saying Merry Christmas Tony, you silly duck. His bag contained these ingredients: used condoms, a week's worth of dry semen, his morning it, piss, and peanut butter. See? Tony was very angry, so he hurled the it bag into Ryan's face the next week at school. TLDR. My buddy Tony tossed a bag of dry semen, fresh it, used condoms, piss and peanut butter into this guy's face. Oh, and the bag exploded promptly. I don't know how gross this is, but when I was a kid I lived with my dad in a semi-rural area. We lived in a very hot arid part of Arizona and our next door neighbor was a gun-toting redneck. We had 2 cats at the time and one day one of them failed to come in the house when called. We looked all over for her and eventually found her body in between ours and our neighbor's house. She had a gunshot wound to the chest. We were certain our neighbor had done it, since he had complained about our cats crawling round his property, but we had no proof. This was in mid-July and it was about 110 degrees during the day. In that area most people use evaporative or swamp coolers. It's essentially a metal box with vents and absorbent pads that are soaked with water and a fan to suck the cool air into your house. Early the next morning, after the neighbor left for work, my dad snuck over and emptied an entire bottle of skunk scent he'd bought from a sporting goods store into the neighbor's swamp cooler. He arrived home at around 6 that evening and couldn't even get in his house. The smell was so strong. He called animal control because he thought a skunk was in his house and spent 3 days hauling out furniture and airing out his house. It didn't make me miss my cat any less, but it was satisfying in its own right. Back in college, one of my buddies was a ridiculous party animal. He never drank to get buzzed, he drank to black out. The problem was that every time he would get wasted he'd stumble over to one of his friend's pads and vomit, urinate, defecate anywhere his alcohol-addled self saw fit. He seemed to derive an immense amount of satisfaction from waking up the next day and asking us what he did and then howling out in delight. Haha, no way I did that. One night, after we finally convinced him to host a party at his place, a group of friends and I were pretty drunk and decided to get revenge. We started off filling a bunch of red cups with piss and then placed them all around our passed out friend like traffic cones around a manhole. Emboldened by our drunkenness, we decided we needed to do something with vomit. We all headed outside to our friend's car and proceeded to force ourselves to vomit all over his black Toyota Camry, from trunk to hood. The next morning we woke our friend up by yelling, "Jason, someone broke into your car." So he drunkenly flails his arms and legs and jumps up, spilling a bunch of the piss cups on himself in the process, goes to his car and sees it caked in dried vomit. Not only did it take him a decently long time to wash all the vomit off, he had to do it while covered our piss. Needless to say, he did not appreciate our gag. Ho ho. Edit. Changed to he had to do it while covered in our piss. Sorry about the confusion. The best revenge I ever conjured up was after my roommates pissed on my car. They were upset that I couldn't remember where to score some trees at our apt complex. But give me a break. I was stoned when I was taken there. Anyway, once I found out, it took me a while to figure out how to get my revenge. But once I did, I knew it would be so much worse than what they did to me. One afternoon, I decided to clean out my roommate's bong collection, and coincidentally, I needed to take a leak more than. I took a piss right in our community bong. To make sure that I wouldn't get caught, I made sure to never partake from that bong during 420, so I stuck to joints. They didn't change out the water for at least a week, and every time someone took a hit, I smiled to myself, knowing that they were inhaling my piss vapors. TLDR, I pissed in my roommate's bong after all 3 of them pissed on my car. They didn't change the bong water for a week. Not quite gross, but satisfying. A douchebag landlord who tried to steal from me found his precious framed wedding portrait missing from its hook. In its place was a note, so small that he could only read it if he stood on the nearby bed. The note read, "Don't stand on the bed. The portrait is under the sheets."